Most people think of the Korean War as a conflict defined by freezing winters, shifting front lines, and political stalemate. What is less understood is that for thousands of prisoners of war, survival hinged not on combat skill or even shelter, but on something far more basic: water. In many POW camps, dehydration, dysentery, and waterborne disease killed quietly, long before exposure or malnutrition finished the job. Modern audiences tend to assume that potable water, or at least rudimentary purification tablets, were standard military provisions by the mid-20th century. That assumption is wrong. In the early 1950s, especially for captured soldiers, clean water was often absent entirely. What kept some men alive were improvised techniques inherited not from modern science, but from older wartime experience, methods learned by World War II prisoners who had already faced the same problem and solved it with charcoal, fire, and patience. If this kind of overlooked survival history matters to you, consider subscribing to Echoes of Valor. This channel exists to preserve the details that don't always make it into standard war narratives, the decisions, adaptations, and quiet knowledge that shaped who lived and who didn't. The Korean War exposed how quickly modern armies could lose access to basic necessities. The Korean War unfolded at the edge of logistical collapse. Rapid advances and retreats, rugged terrain, and destroyed infrastructure meant that supply lines were fragile even for frontline units. For prisoners of war, the situation was far worse. Many camps, particularly in North Korea and later in Chinese-controlled areas, were established hastily with little planning for sanitation or water sourcing. Wells were shallow or non-existent. Streams served simultaneously as drinking water, washing sites, and waste disposal. Seasonal flooding turned camps into reservoirs of contamination. Medical records and survivor testimonies show that dysentery, typhoid, and chronic dehydration were persistent threats. In some camps, more prisoners were incapacitated by gastrointestinal illness than by physical abuse or cold exposure. This reality forced captives to confront a problem that modern soldiers are rarely trained to solve: without equipment, how to make unsafe water marginally drinkable, using whatever materials were available. The knowledge POWs relied on was not new, but inherited from earlier wars. The improvised charcoal filtration methods used by Korean War POWs did not originate in that conflict. They were passed down, often informally, from veterans of World War II. Allied soldiers captured by Japan, Germany, and Italy had faced similar conditions: polluted water sources, minimal medical care, and the constant risk of disease. In those camps, prisoners rediscovered or reinvented basic filtration principles that predated industrial water treatment. Charcoal, particularly from hardwood burned under low oxygen conditions, had long been known to absorb impurities. Ancient civilizations used it for medicinal purposes, and 19th-century militaries experimented with it for water treatment. World War II POWs, deprived of proper filters, adapted this knowledge using cook fires, scrap containers, and cloth. Those who survived carried the memory forward. In Korea, that memory became a lifeline. Charcoal was valuable not because it made water safe, but because it made it survivable. It is important to be precise about what improvised charcoal filtration could and could not do. It did not sterilize water. It did not reliably remove viruses or all bacteria. What it did accomplish was reduction. Charcoal adsorbed organic compounds, reduced odor and taste, and trapped some particulate matter that carried pathogens. When combined with settling and boiling, when fuel was available, it significantly lowered the microbial load. POWs would first allow muddy or visibly contaminated water to sit undisturbed, letting heavier particles settle at the bottom. The clearer water at the top was then poured slowly through layers of cloth packed with crushed charcoal. Containers ranged from mess tins with punched holes to bamboo sections or discarded cans. The charcoal itself was often scavenged from cooking fires, carefully selected from wood rather than coal when possible. The result was not clean water by modern standards, but it was often the difference between chronic illness and marginal functionality. In camps, where even this level of preparation was impossible, mortality rates were noticeably higher. The act of purification was also an act of control, in an environment designed to strip it away. POW camps were environments of enforced dependence, where captives had little control over food, shelter, or movement. The ability to improve one's water, even slightly, restored a sense of decision-making and competence. Groups that shared knowledge and coordinated purification efforts tended to fare better. Men who understood fire management, chemistry basics, or who had learned from older veterans often became informal leaders. This kind of micro-organization mattered. It conserved energy, reduced risk-taking, and created routines that stabilized morale. Military psychologists studying POW resilience after the war noted that such small acts of problem-solving had disproportionate effects on survival. They countered learned helplessness and reinforced the idea that not everything was dictated by captors or circumstance. The high incidence of waterborne illness among prisoners of war during the Second World War and Korea did not go unnoticed by military planners. Post-war survival manuals increasingly emphasized water procurement and purification as primary skills, not secondary concerns. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, escape and evasion training incorporated lessons directly traceable to POW experience. Charcoal filtration appears repeatedly in these manuals, not as a perfect solution, but as a field expedient measure when tablets or filters are unavailable. The Korean War acted as a bridge between pre-industrial improvisation and modern survival doctrine. It demonstrated that technological superiority collapses quickly in captivity or isolation, and that soldiers must retain low-tech competencies. This shift also influenced civilian preparedness culture during the Cold War. Government pamphlets on civil defense and wilderness survival echoed the same principles: settle, filter, boil. The lineage of that advice runs straight through POW camps. Improvised methods carried risks, and not everyone judged them correctly. Some prisoners used coal or treated wood that leached toxins into the water. Others skipped boiling due to fuel scarcity, assuming filtration alone was sufficient. These misjudgments sometimes proved fatal. The historical record is clear that survival depended not just on action, but on correct prioritization. POWs who conserved energy, avoided unnecessary exertion, and applied filtration consistently did better than those who took desperate shortcuts. This underscores a broader lesson about survival under constraint. Knowledge must be paired with restraint. Modern survival narratives often glorify improvisation without acknowledging its limits. The POW experience offers a corrective. Improvisation works best when grounded in understanding, not optimism. The story of charcoal water purification among POWs challenges the way wars are commonly remembered. It shifts focus away from weapons and tactics and toward infrastructure collapse, logistics failure, and human adaptation. It reminds us that war is not only fought by armies, but endured by individuals navigating systems that have broken down. In Korea, as in the Second World War, many deaths occurred far from combat zones, caused by neglect rather than enemy action. These outcomes shaped international law, influenced the Geneva Convention's later enforcement mechanisms, and left lasting psychological scars on survivors. Remembering these details is not an exercise in nostalgia or morbidity. It is a way of understanding how fragile modern systems become under stress, and how much depends on the quiet transmission of practical knowledge. In an era dominated by advanced filtration systems and supply chain confidence, it is easy to dismiss improvised methods as obsolete. History suggests otherwise. Natural disasters, conflicts, and displacement continue to strip people of infrastructure with little warning. The lessons learned by POWs under extreme conditions remain relevant precisely because they were learned when nothing else worked. Understanding how and why charcoal filtration was used, its strengths, its limits, and its context, offers more than a survival tip. It offers insight into human problem-solving under constraint and into the kinds of knowledge worth preserving, even in technologically advanced societies. These stories deserve attention because they reveal what war really does to people when the shooting stops and the systems fail. If you value this kind of careful, grounded historical analysis, subscribe to Echoes of Valor and share this video with others who care about understanding the past beyond headlines and battle maps.